Kyuduo is a smoke-addicted loser who somehow managed to bag his smoke show coworker despite being built like Johnny Bravo. However, when she suddenly forgets everything about him, he becomes obsessed with figuring out the truth so they can finally have a freaky honeymoon. It all starts on a random morning as a baddie named Kyujuri drags herself out of bed for a quick smoke before getting ready for work. Moments later, she heads out and spots a couple of locals watching news about a company called Generic Terra that supposedly cracked the code to upload human memories and immortality. Shortly after that, she finally reaches the office, and Lee immediately points out the fact that she is later than usual, so she tries to clock in, but Kyuduo suddenly pushes past her to slot his card in first. As a result, she ends up being a minute late and complains about it before handing over the new house listings. He tries to ignore her with the hope that she will let it slide, but she continues calling him childish, so he offers to take her to lunch as an apology. While he and Lee start a conversation about their city's nostalgic vibe, Kyujuri begins to notice that her glasses prescription feels off. Hours later, she takes Kyuduo to a new restaurant and asks if they can try it out, but he refuses and drags her all the way to their usual spot. Upon seeing the disappointed look on her face, he takes his dumpling close to her face to convince her that it tastes better than anything else. But her eyes start acting up again. The next moment, he sees the eye drop she is using and warns her against trusting the company behind it because its new CEO looks like a ladyboy that eats lip filler for breakfast. After talking about an apartment that hasn't been getting any new tenants, they both start heading back, but when she asks if he wants to get tea with the time they have left, he tells her to go get an eye checkup instead. Shortly after the checkup, she returns to the office, and Lee gives her a compliment because she looks good without the glasses. He then asks Kyuduo for his opinion, but he claims the glasses actually looked better on her. Later that day, they go up to burn a bunch of old documents, and while typing to stretch, Kyuduo sees the Generic Terra pyramid and starts ranting about the hate he has for the company and their goal to create a more advanced world. After they both light up their smokes, Kyujuri says she still wants to try out the new restaurant before it closes down. Kyuduo then reminds her that Kowloon is an extremely nostalgic city that thrives on its residents' love for the old way of life and always ignores any attempt for change. He goes on to say that the nostalgic feeling reminds him of being in love. But then Kyujuri suddenly says that she gets the same feeling whenever she is around him. Just as she explains that it doesn't mean she loves him, he stops himself from kissing her and says she has a lot of face wrinkles. At the office the following day, Lee asks why she is back on glasses, so she explains that it's a fake one just to help her work better because she hasn't gotten used to not needing one. When Kyuduo says she is just trying to hide the old lady wrinkles on her face, she sees a stain on his shirt and tries to clean it. He then pulls away and says he has a rule to always touch the number 8 whenever he sees it painted on a wall. After dark, he finally completes all his tasks for the day and grabs his coat before telling her to pack up so they can go get dinner. Minutes later, she notices that they aren't heading to the usual spot. But when she tells him, he ignores her until they end up in a busy restaurant chain in the heart of the city. He then takes her on a food tour to taste everything they can swallow until she reaches breaking point. Before going home, he decides to take her to one last spot called the Goldfish Tea House, and once they enter, a waiter named Gen welcomes Kyuduo like he is a regular and quickly takes their order while Kyujuri obsesses over the goldfish. After Gen serves their iced coffee with a plate of watermelon, Kyujuri immediately starts feasting and lights up a cigarette as well before telling Kyuduo that it tastes better with watermelon. Upon seeing the shocked look on his face, she asks if it sounds weird to him, but he says someone has said those exact words to him once before. On the way out moments later, Gen expresses how excited he is to see Kyuduo back with his girlfriend, and she tries to explain that they are just co-workers, but Kyuduo starts calling out to her. When she eventually tells him about it, he simply says she shouldn't worry about it before giving her a goldfish to take care of. Days later, she decides to spend her Saturday repainting the old unit they were talking about the other day, but after hours of battling the heat stroke, her last remaining brain cells evaporate. As she tries to paint the last wall, her consciousness starts to fade, but Kyuduo shows up right on time to catch her. After giving her a cold tea to help with the heat, he picks up the brush to finish the last wall while she slowly realizes that she is in love with him. At the start of the following week, she finds him sleeping on the office couch and realizes it would be the perfect chance to tease him. However, her plan suddenly takes a drastic turn when he grabs her by the hair and pulls her in for an aggressive makeout session. The next moment, he fully wakes up and pushes her away before getting up to leave. saying he thought she was someone else. Shortly after that, he asks for lunch suggestions and casually leaves to get some, causing her anxiety to reach new heights as she struggles to understand what is going on with him. Upon seeing his files scattered across the floor, she tries to pack it up but notices a photo of him with someone else sticking out of the drawer. After pulling it out and seeing herself in the picture, she clocks out and ends up at the Goldfish Tea House. As she pulls out the picture to take another look, Gen tells her that they had a lot of fun on the night it was taken. But this confuses her, so she asks how he knows about it. He then reminds her that it was the night she got engaged to Kyuduo, and he was the one who took the photo. On her way back home, Kyujuri remains lost in thought about the picture until a tenant calls to complain about their noisy neighbor. After getting the address, she promises to look into it and immediately tracks down the noisy neighbor's apartment. The moment she rings the bell, an ungodly amount of horror movie teddies begin to fall out, nearly giving her a heart attack. Just then, Yaomei crawls out and tries to explain that she has to make hundreds of them, but Kyujuri drops to the ground to get her heart rate back to normal. Moments later, Yaomei offers her a cup of tea and continues explaining why she has turned her place into a doll factory, before noticing that Kyujuri is barely paying attention. When she offers to get her some painkillers in case the jump scare really got to her, Kyujuri slides over the photo, so Yaomei takes one look at it and asks if Kyuduo is cheating on her. Kyujuri then says that she isn't the one in the photo, but Yaomei takes another look and says she is definitely the one. Kyujuri goes on to say that she is only his co-worker and further explains that seeing that picture made her realize that she has absolutely no memory of her past. Upon hearing this, Yaomei slides the picture back and says she probably isn't the girl in it, but this confuses Kyujuri, so Yaomei says she also keeps her past locked away. After explaining how she spent top dollar to go from a human beluga to Sydney Sweeney, she gets up to prepare egg tarts and continues talking about how she would never acknowledge a past experience, even if someone from before her surgery recognizes her. While serving up the egg tarts, she also tells Kyujuri that it was the first thing she ate after waking up from the surgery. As they both eat, Kyuduo returns to the office and notices the missing photo, so he thinks back to the day he got transferred to the office and met Kyujuri for the first time. After a warm welcome, she took him out for a tour of the city and said his name sounded a lot like one of the good fortune phrases the locals love to use. She also told him that they considered 8 to be a lucky number before joining the senior citizens for a quick game of mahjong. Shortly after that, they ended up at the usual lunch spot, but seeing as it was his first time there, she made it clear that he should only ever take her out for lunch to the same exact place. When he asked why they couldn't try something else, she showed him the perfect dumpling in her spoon to shut him up. On the rooftop minutes later, she gave him a cup of her favorite watermelon juice before lighting up for a smoke. He then asked if there was anything else to know about Kowloon, and she suddenly said being in love should be at the top of his bucket list. The weird suggestion shocked him, so she decided to explain how Kowloon's nostalgic vibe made her obsessed with living there and told him to try falling in love if he really wanted to get the full experience. While also preparing for a smoke, he reminded her of the government's plans to demolish Kowloon, but she told him not to worry because they had been saying the same thing for years. The following night, Kyujuri and Yaomei decide to try a fried chicken restaurant, and they both fall in love with the chef after the first bite. When Yaomei asks why she seems to be a little more optimistic, Kyujuri pulls out the photo and says she still wants to figure out the truth behind her past. Yaomei then suggests asking Kyuduo about it, but after her face goes red at the thought of him, Kyujuri says they have to find another way because he would have said something if he wasn't trying to keep it secret. The next moment, Yaomei decides to use her brain for once and says she might have amnesia, which would explain why Kyuduo hasn't said anything, as he is probably waiting for her memories to come back. Kyujuri admits that her theory might not be completely worthless, but still wonders what Kyuduo thinks of her without her memories. By sundown the following day, he gets tired of working and asks if she wants to get dinner together, so she suggests trying the fried chicken restaurant instead of the usual spot. As he tries to explain why their usual spot is the best, she reminds him of the time she said being around him feels nostalgic. She then asks if he feels the same way, and when he says yes, she makes him look straight into her eyes to get a reaction out of him. The next moment, he leans in and grabs her ear before asking why she hasn't gotten it pierced and saying that her wrinkles are getting bigger. After she refuses to go with him, he summons his nonchalant alter ego and immediately walks out to eat on his own, while she returns the photo to his file drawer. Days later, the news channel informs everyone in Kowloon about a free checkup promo at the beauty and healthcare center run by Dr. Miyuki, the rich ladyboy Kyujo was ranting about the other day. Shortly after that, Kyujirai and Yaomei show up for the consultation, and Yaomei starts praying that she meets the doctor in person. When Kyujirai asks if he is really that big of a deal, Yaomei explains how he took over his father's company and turned into a globally famous cash cow. Just then, a girl named Sheahi runs up to greet Kyujirai, so she introduces the both of them to each other before they start taking as many free tests as possible. On the way to the final one, they see a lady offering free consultations for beauty procedures, and Yaomei immediately begs for a detour so she can make sure the implants in her melons are still in perfect condition. Upon seeing that they also offer anti-aging consultations, Kyujirai remembers all of Kudo's jokes about her wrinkles and decides to book an appointment. While she fills in the hospital form, Kudo has just heard that Gen suddenly decided to stop working at the Goldfish Tea House, so he leaves. Moments later, Yaomei and Kyujirai also hear the same thing, and Yaomei gets disappointed as she was hoping to interrogate him for every detail about the picture. After she asks Kyujirai for a description in case she runs into him again, they come across a roadside jeweler, so Kyujirai stops to look through his earrings while thinking of when Kudo suggested getting a piercing. Yaomei then tries to say that it will only make her look like the person she was in the past. However, one look at Kyujirai's face makes her realize that she wants to be like her past, so she decides to help by choosing one that looks similar to the picture. At the office the following day, Kudo checks Gen's apartment details to know if he moved, but the server mysteriously shuts down when he gets close. Just then, Kyujirai walks in, and Kudo freezes in shock upon seeing her new look with the earrings on. He immediately gets up to hold her, but just as he reaches for her face, she says the earrings are actually clip-ons because she isn't quite ready for an actual piercing. Kudo then tells her to stop the wannabe act and storms out. Hours later, she goes to Yaomei's place and drops the earring before bawling her eyes out and saying she was stupid for thinking that pretending like the girl in the picture would make him happy. While Yaomei apologizes for getting her hopes up and takes her inside, Kudo finds a spot in an alley to quietly deal with his emotions. Early the next day, Kudo joins her on the balcony for a smoke, and when she reminds him of his episode the other day, he apologizes and says he was just having a bad day. She initially accepts the apology but suddenly switches up her attitude and says she will only forgive him if he lets her pick their lunch spot for the day. After seeing how serious she is, he suggests going to dinner instead, so she can have all the time she needs to make him see why trying a new spot isn't so bad. Hours later, he tries his first fried chicken and ends up liking it, which causes Kyujirai to start singing "I Told You So" right in his face. Shortly after that, they leave the restaurant, and he holds her hand so she won't fall into a puddle. But this triggers a series of strong emotions from the both of them, so he leaves her hand before going to watch the generic Terra Pyramid. Days later, she takes Yaomei along for her beauty consultation. But before heading in to see the doctor, Yaomei makes her put on some lipstick because it's apparently disrespectful to see him with a plain face. When she enters his office moments later, Miyuki quickly takes a look at her file before walking over to get a feel of her face. He then starts asking a bunch of personal questions to understand her daily routine. But when she tells him about her suspicious amnesia, he quickly turns to hide a wicked smile and says her wrinkles have no history. This confuses her, so he explains that while regular people develop wrinkles due to their daily activities and the effect of time, her own seems to have been in her face right from the start of her existence. After suddenly saying that her lost memories might not even exist, he leans in and asks if he can get to know her better before wiping off her lipstick while sticking out a modified tongue. As she immediately storms out and takes Yaomei with her, he watches from the office and gets excited to see what comes next for her. Sometime in the past, Kyujirai took Kudo out to help one of the senior citizens she played mahjong with, but on the way back, he suddenly went out of breath, so she suggested taking a break at her place to cool off. Once they got there, he kept standing outside, and when she asked why, he admitted that he had never been in a baddie's apartment before. She then laughed at how naive he was and brought him inside before showing him to the sink so he could save himself from the heat stroke. After taking a glass of water from the refrigerator, he sat on her bed and took a look around while she went to the balcony to bring herself one step closer to lung cancer. At the start of the new week, Kyujirai decides to try on a new makeup to avoid another traumatic experience with anyone similar to Dr. Ladyboy. At the office later that morning, she tries to welcome Kudo, but Miyuki shows up with an assistant and almost gives him a heart attack. After Lee starts glazing harder than your girl at a Chris Brown concert, they take him to a table, and Kyujurai makes every effort to avoid eye contact while Kyuduo tries to find the perfect opportunity to knock the smile off his face. When Miyuki tells Lee to take his time looking for a new building location and claims to have already found what he wants while staring at Kyujurai, Kyuduo loses it and starts asking why he is trying to strip her with his eyes. Miyuki replies that he is just trying to appreciate her beauty, but Kyuduo gets up close and tells him to stop acting like he doesn't prefer chocolate-flavored glizzies. After soaking his eyes in pepper spray, Miyuki gets up to leave but suddenly pulls Kyujurai close for a sloppy kiss. He then tells her to leave the broke tobacco addict who didn't even notice her new lipstick and come be with him instead. Moments later, his assistant claims to have been shocked by the sudden kiss, so he reminds her that he takes whatever he wants before asking for gloves and a face mask to protect himself from poor people germs. Later that day, Kyuduo follows Kyujurai to a local shop so she can find a new tank for the goldfish. When she eventually finds one and realizes that it's too heavy, he offers to help her carry it back, and she uses that opportunity to add a broom to the purchase. Shortly after that, they get back to her place, and while she starts setting up the tank, he takes a look around and smiles when he notices that she still keeps her toothbrush in the same spot. However, after not finding any water in the fridge and seeing one of Yaomei's Halloween dolls on her table, he grabs a watermelon before heading to the balcony for a smoke. Just then, she comes up with a name for the goldfish, but he quickly loses interest in staying, so he wishes her luck and leaves. At the office the next day, he finds a sunflower at his table and asks if it's some kind of punishment, but she explains that it's her way of saying thank you for his help with the fish tank. Just then, Xiaohei shows up to tell Kyujurai that she needs help finding a new apartment, and when Kyuduo asks if the Yaomei's noise is still too much for her, she says it's actually because she needs a bigger spot for all her clothes. He then suggests throwing them away instead, but she calls him stupid for failing to understand the amount of work that goes into becoming the greatest fashion icon of the slums. The next moment, she sees the sunflower and gets excited, so he asks if she wants it. But then she asks if he has feelings for her and explains that giving someone a sunflower is a special way of saying you love them. Upon hearing this, Kyujurai immediately drags her away to hunt for apartments. But after hours of looking at different rooms, Xiaohei still says they haven't found the one. When Kyujurai asks if she has considered getting a place outside Kowloon, she suddenly says something about choosing to live out her past life in Kowloon before Kyuduo calls to say that he found a good spot. Moments later, Kyujurai tells him that she purposely skipped the room because it's weird, but when he opens the door, Xiaohei falls in love and says she loves teasing her claustrophobia with incredibly small spaces. Kyuduo then takes them up to see the roof, and while Xiaohei excitedly runs around, he gives Kyujurai some pointers for weird clients before Xiaohei calls them to see a cluster of sunflowers. Hours later, Kyujurai tries to pay for another watermelon, and after she drops a coin, a green-haired man in a mask suddenly picks it up. So she thanks him, but he remains silent and plays around for a bit before giving it back to her. In what appears to be a mansion later that night, two maids talk about the recent news circulating about the fact that Dr. Ladyboy might actually be an illegitimate son. While they continue gossiping, he starts a random conversation with the green-haired man from before, who also apparently likes taking it from the back. After the small talk, Miyuki asks for his thoughts on Kyujurai, and he admits that he was shocked by the fact that she looks and feels exactly the same as before. The next moment, he starts complaining of being hungry and asks if they can go get some food, but Miyuki tells him to go alone because he still has a ton of work to do. He then picks up the phone for an important call, but his zesty boyfriend pulls off his robe to feast on his Yakuza glizzy. The next day, Kyuduo meets up with the owner of a beverage warehouse to ask if he knows where Gwen moved to because he usually works with the restaurant. But the man reminds him that he should be the one with answers as a real estate agent. After saying that he could not get any info on Gwen's apartment history, he leaves and starts to wonder what the heck is going on in Kowloon. Meanwhile, Kyujurai tries to enjoy a smoke at Xiaohei's new apartment building, but the masked glizzy gobbler shows up and turns out to actually be Gwen. After recognizing him, she asks if he knew her from before the night Kyuduo first took her to the Goldfish Tea House. He then says that he can never forget the relationship between the former Kyujurai and Kyuduo before suddenly changing his expression and saying that she can never be her because the Kyujurai he knew is long gone. He goes on to say that seeing her makes him upset because it feels like watching an imposter play around with the memory of someone he cherishes. After telling her to extend his greeting to Kyuduo, he leaves, and Kyujurai ends up taking a slow and painful walk back to the office where she sees that Kyuduo has already let the sunflower she gave him die. As soon as she picks it up, he claims to not have any feelings for her, and she says she already knows before throwing it in the trash. Over the next couple of days, she develops insomnia and spends virtually all her time trying to come to terms with the fact that she has been living someone else's life without knowing how it all started. On one particular afternoon, she accidentally drops the old printouts right in front of the furnace, so Kyuduo asks if she can still see clearly, but she says it's just the lack of sleep. When he suggests going back to her glasses until she feels comfortable without them, she refuses and suddenly asks if she isn't the Kyujurai he knows. After he says she is the only one who never got to know old Kyujurai, she admits that almost everything about her life might belong to someone else before saying that some of the new stuff, like her goldfish and love for lemon chicken, definitely belong to her. When she also says her love for him is true, he interrupts and explains that she is merely living through an illusion that forces her to believe she has feelings for him. As she tries to explain how real her feelings are, she suddenly starts coughing and loses consciousness while he runs to catch her. Sometime in the past, Kyujurai took Kyuduo out to celebrate his transfer to the branch and apologized for not knowing anyone else who would have wanted to join. After saying that it wasn't a problem, he asked if the rumors of Kowloon once being demolished were true, and she explained that it actually got destroyed years ago. This made him confused, so he asked how it was still standing, and she told him how the residents illegally rebuilt it because they just couldn't give up the nostalgic feeling they got from living there. Shortly after that, they started heading out, but after stumbling into a wall, Kyujurai reminded him of a spot he always talked about before asking if they served booze. He then explained that he didn't know enough about their menu yet but refused to take her anywhere else because she clearly had too many. The next moment, her plot armor slipped, so he told her to put it back and said she had to handle herself with more care. All of a sudden, she pulled him in for a kiss and admitted to having feelings for him, so he pushed her back against the wall for a hot makeout session. The following morning, Kyujurai wakes up in his bed and gets shocked when he tells her that he had to bring her back to his place. So he reminds her that she suddenly passed out and remained unconscious since then. As she tries to wrap her head around everything, he suddenly offers to tell her everything about the Kyujurai he was in love with. But after thinking about how the truth might make her current life meaningless, she tells him not to worry. He then promises to explain what happened to Lee, and when she asks if he saw the key to her place, he shows her a spare from his time with the old Kyujurai and asks if she really doesn't want to know how he got it. Once again, she claims to not want the truth, so he gives her the key and explains how she should lock his place up before heading out. Meanwhile, Miyuki has just asked Gwen why they have to dress like strippers from Hawaii, so Gwen reminds him that the current version of Kyujurai is in love with Kudo, which can only mean that the second version of him will also want to get his back blown out. Hearing this only makes Miyuki a lot more interested, so they head over to the Goldfish Tea House, and Gwen points out how similar it looks to the one he knows. At the back moments later, he tells Miyuki that they are definitely in a different Kowloon, because when he was still a waiter, there was a cat shelter he built to keep all the strays safe from rain. He then takes Miyuki to a shop that sells Hebanuma eye drops from 3 years ago like they were just made, but Miyuki tells him that it's perfectly normal for old products to get resold years after production. Gwen still insists that something is off about the current Kowloon, and when he says Kyujurai still has the same mole on her face, Miyuki gets shocked and reminds him that beauty marks like that don't get replicated when clones are made. While he suddenly gets excited to learn more about her, Kyuduo tries to enjoy a peaceful smoke on the balcony. Meanwhile, Yaomei has just shown up to Kyujurai's place to express how excited she is over the new job she got. After congratulating her, Kyujurai explains how her former self they saw in that photo has apparently passed away, and Yaomei nearly loses bladder control before asking if she knows everything about her. When Kyujurai says she didn't want to ask Kyuduo about it, she gets even more surprised, so Kyujurai explains her decision to focus on living as her own person and not the low-quality version of her former self. After Yaomei accepts her decision but says her origin will always be a mystery, Kyujurai tells her about the time Miyuki said her wrinkles had always been there. Yaomei then says she might be a clone and brings up the night she stumbled on a post about the Gene Terra company's plans to conduct research on a type of clones they called zirconians. Upon hearing this, Kyujurai remembers a gem called zirconia that they use as a fake substitute for diamonds, and this makes her a bit emotional as she starts to think her entire life might be fake. but then Yaomei tells her to join her in bed after turning all the lights off. Kyujirai quickly climbs in and Loki expects to have her first scissoring. But then Yaomei shows her how brightly the fake gem glows just to explain that being fake doesn't mean she can't have an amazing life. At the office the following day, Kyuduo notices that she is in an unusually good mood, so he asks if anything special happened. But she only tells him that she will be having lunch with Yaomei instead of their usual routine. On his way back from lunch hours later, he hears their voices and quickly hides before they walk past him. Just then, Yaomei asks Kyujirai if she has considered moving out of her current apartment and starting over completely so she can fully embrace a new identity. When she claims to be good with her current room, Yaomei asks why she would want to live in the shadow of her former self, so she explains that it is the only lasting proof of old Kyujirai's existence. Later that day, she meets Kyuduo on the balcony to tell him about a housewarming party Yaomei has planned to celebrate her new place, and when she asks if he wants to join them, he refuses but hands her some money as his contribution. However, he still ends up joining them on the roof thanks to Yaomei's persuasion, and Yaomei immediately serves him all the lemon on the platter so she can have all the chicken. Moments later, she pulls out pictures of a new apartment for Kyujirai to look at, but after she still refuses to even consider it, Yaomei asks Kyuduo if he thinks getting a new place would be good for her. After he says she can move if she wants to, she stands on her decision to stay in the current apartment. A couple of minutes later, Yaomei and Yaomei offer to pack up the table and chairs, so the two of them go to burn the trash. As he then takes that opportunity to get a smoke break, she asks for a spare cigarette, but he uses that to make fun of her because he only has one left. Just then, she notices Miyuki's banner and reminds him of the day he came to the office before he suddenly pins her against the railing and reaches in. Instead of a kiss, he shares some of the cigarette smoke and tells her to stop leaving herself open before leaving. The following afternoon, she finds him playing mahjong with the old guys, and after saying she has decided to ditch lunch with Yaomei for their usual spot, she notices that Mr. Young isn't around and asks why. While they try to explain his sudden disappearance, Miyuki welcomes him to the facility and assures him that they are only conducting a routine checkup. Just then, he gets a call from some of his workers who have just brought what looks like a second Mr. Young to Kowloon. But as soon as he steps foot inside, the current Mr. Young vanishes into thin air. With that, he and Gwen agree that his clone is definitely not running around somewhere. But then Miyuki gets curious about the original Kyujirai and asks how she died. While Gwen tells him that it was an accident, Kudo and Kyujirai start heading home, and when she starts asking if he has any idea why Mr. Young would suddenly vanish, he tells her that he might have kicked the bucket. She immediately tells him to stop joking about that, but he goes on to say that people are fragile before asking for what she knows about the original Kyujirai. When she says Gwen only told her that she passed away, he suddenly starts laughing and says he is the one responsible for her death. After giving her a moment to believe he might actually be a psychopath, he claims it was a joke, but when she says he must have been trying to forget about her, his mood suddenly changes again. Later that evening, Yaomei tells her that he is definitely responsible for what happened to her past self because no normal husband would randomly joke about unaliving a woman he claims to have loved. Despite knowing that the joke is a dangerous red flag, Kyujirai still insists that he didn't mean anything by it before wishing Yaomei a good night's rest and heading home. Before getting to her apartment, she remembers the look he had on his face when she wore fake earrings and suddenly starts fighting the urge to play a mixtape on her kitty. The following afternoon, she rolls over in bed and sees a bunch of books the old Kyujirai liked to read, so she decides to glance through a few pages on one of them before getting a text from Yaomei. She then tries to return it to the shelf but gets intrigued by a glimmer of light, so she reaches in and pulls out a diamond ring. At the office the following day, the both of them struggle to stay awake while working until she asks if he knows any bookstore where she can find other volumes of mystery books. Immediately after work, they meet up with Yaomei, who then starts glaring at Kyuduo while asking if he has a problem if she tags along. After telling her to do what she wants, he gives Kyujirai an umbrella, which only makes them question his sanity a lot more because the sun has been out all day long. However, when they get to a section of the city where it rains piss and turd water, Yaomei starts to think he might be a pretty chill guy after all. Shortly after, they get to the bookstore and find Yaomei working the front desk, so the girls greet her before Kyujirai asks for the mystery section. She then tracks down the second volume, but after seeing that the letters are all messed up, she complains to Kyuduo, who then takes one look at it and says he has actually read both volumes before. When he tries to tell her the boring ending, she tells him to stop and says she will find the proper version, even if she has to spend weeks searching the entire city. He once again tries to tell her that it's not worth it, but Yaomei returns to threaten him. Kyujirai then decides to get another book, but ends up picking one that reminds him of her past self. So he tries to talk her out of it, only to receive the death stare from Yaomei again. At a restaurant several minutes later, Yaomei asks why she is so fixated on remembering the kind of person the former Kyujirai was, so she comes up with a bunch of reasons to hide her true intention, which is to learn why Kyujuo was so addicted to her past self. Early the next day, Gwen wishes Miyuki luck before he leaves for a TV interview, and the maids admit that Miyuki has been in a better mood ever since Gwen started gobbling his glizzy. Shortly after that, Miyuki goes live on a beauty show to speak with a lady who hates the fact that her face looks like it was constructed with Lego bricks. After he shows what her face would be like after a couple of surgeries with him, she also complains about her smile. But he tells her that there is nothing wrong with having a smile that's a little different from everyone else's. His sweet words cause her to forget about her insecurity until the co-host starts asking why they should take advice from a trust fund brat who only used daddy's money to fund his obsession with facelifts and Botox. When Miyuki asks if he is trying to say that he didn't have to work for his success, the co-host ignores him to continue yapping about being a first-generation entrepreneur. So Miyuki kicks him out of the chair and casually continues the interview like nothing happened. After the main host calls for a commercial break, Yaomei claims that she has an idea of what Miyuki must be going through and tells Kyujirai that it doesn't always feel good to follow a path that was prepared by the past. Upon realizing what she is trying to say, Kyujirai gets up to leave, but then the restaurant owner casually gives them tickets to see a famous old movie. For some reason, Yaomei suddenly becomes anxious and refuses to go see it with Kyujirai, so she leaves to watch it by herself. At a fabric store the next day, she tries to tell her all about it. But Yaomei ignores her to continue shopping until she says that the lead actress wore a dress similar to the fabric she just selected. All of a sudden, Yaomei starts asking if she is even a little bit scared of the fact that digging up the truth about her past self will make her life meaningless. Without even giving her a chance to answer the question, she shoves the fabric into her hands and claims she will never understand her struggles before running home and fighting to stop her past self from taking over. Turns out, Yaomei was actually the famous actress Kyujirai just saw in the theater, but unlike what everyone thought about her back then, she secretly hated the way her mother groomed her to basically become a clone who would take after her in the spotlight. Before lunch the following day, Kyujirai sees that she has still not returned her texts and decides to get her something as a form of apology. But while eating with Kyuduo a couple of minutes later, she realizes that she doesn't have the slightest clue what to get and asks him for ideas. After she explains the situation and says that not having a past she remembers makes it hard to relate, he tells her to forget about a gift and just try speaking to Yaomei from the heart. A couple of hours later, she heads over to Yaomei's place with egg tarts and asks if they can talk. But Yaomei becomes fully engrossed in her past self and tells her to leave because the version of Yaomei she knows is a complete fraud. Kyujirai then admits that she has no idea what it means to desperately want to forget the past, but also says that she has always respected the way she fights to build her new identity despite all she has gone through. Just as she reminds her of the night they first had a deep conversation about discovering themselves, Yaomei runs out to hug her. Minutes later, Kyujirai takes her out to shop for earrings, and after she runs off to pay for a nice pair, Kyujirai sees Kyujuo in his natural state and becomes convinced that her feelings are definitely real. Meanwhile, Miyuki has just received a call from his dad demanding a meeting so he can explain why he attacked the co-host for simply telling the truth. In a dream the following day, Kyujuo relives the first day he took the former Kyujirai to the Goldfish Tea House and completely loses it after he wakes up. At the same time, the entire city suddenly gets shaken up by an earthquake. Shortly after that, Miyuki arrives at his dad's place, and after explaining that his outburst on the show was just due to stress, his dad tells him to drop the excuses and control his tongue next time. He then calls him closer to ask about his progress with the cloning program, and after Miyuki claims it's not something he should be bothered with, he warns him against making the mistake of thinking he is too old to make a move on his own. After he starts asking questions about Miyuki's freaky escapades with Gwen, Miyuki leaves and immediately falls into Gwen's arms as soon as he gets back home. They then spend the night blowing each other's backs out, but after waking up the next day, Gwen finds his things packed up and realizes that Miyuki wants to dump him. He gets pissed off and immediately storms into Miyuki's office to demand answers. But Miyuki tells him to leave and promises to send him a ton of money for his brain-curling head game. Gwen still refuses to leave and tries to change his mind, but Miyuki refuses to listen, so he pulls him in for one last kiss before suddenly biting his lip. After Miyuki pushes him away, Gwen tells him not to forget who he is and says he will always love him before leaving and finding a place in Kowloon. While on his bed, he thinks back to the day Kujuo and the former Kujurai stopped by after work for the usual. When Kujuo returned the first part of her book and asked for spoilers on the second one, she said she had not read it and didn't even want to. This caused Gwen to get intrigued, so he asked if she found the first one boring. But she said it was actually the opposite because she enjoyed it so much and didn't want to ruin the feeling by reading a boring sequel. After Kujuo said he preferred accepting the uncertainty that comes with trying out new things, Gwen told them about the demolition of Kowloon and asked if they were making plans to leave. Kujuo was already certain that they would probably transfer him back to Japan, while Gwen said he would probably just try to start a new life in Hong Kong. Before Kujurai could say anything, Kujuo remembered that he had to meet up with Shiohei, so he promised to stay longer next time before heading out. The next day, Gwen starts a new job delivering packages, but his very first one takes a turn when the customer turns out to be Yaomei. She immediately becomes obsessed with his looks and asks for his name, which he easily tells her before realizing that he should have used a fake one. Just then, she remembers when Kujurai described and takes him to a restaurant for a meeting with her. After Kujurai starts by asking if she is a clone, his response tells her all she needs to know, so she asks if he is also a clone. He then admits to having a second copy, but claims to not be a clone like her because he is the real one. When she suddenly tells him the joke Kujuo made about killing the original Kujurai, he says Kujuo never actually did it. Upon hearing this, the both of them ask how the original Kujurai died, but he claims she is not ready for the truth because it might cause her to take the same path that ended her original self. When she asks how that can even be possible, he tells her that having feelings for Kujuo is proof that she is merely a copy of the original Kujuo. After she suddenly blows up and says her feelings have nothing to do with the original Kujurai, Yaomei supports her, and Gwen admits that she is actually starting to look a lot different from the Kujurai he knew. She then remembers an important task from the office and decides to continue their conversation later, but Yaomei decides to stay back with him. Moments later, he gets intrigued by the fact that she is new to Kowloon and asks if she has been experiencing anything out of the ordinary. After she tells him about the steps she took to become a different person, and how she actually turned into her past self the other day, he asks how she returned to her current form. She then explains how Kujurai helped her focus on creating her new identity, and that causes him to wonder if Miyuki is going through something similar. At the office later that day, Kujuo catches Kujurai eating his cup noodles and loses it, so she apologizes and says she couldn't grab lunch before offering to get more for him after work. After he tells her not to worry about it and returns to his desk, she starts to realize that what Gwen said about her being different from the original Kujurai is true. But then she wonders how Kujuo feels about seeing the face of his dead wife every day. Meanwhile, Miyuki has just stopped by at a clinic to see an old doctor named Wong and asks if he can get pregnant. Like the question isn't shocking enough, Dr. Wong tells him to stop thinking that having a kitty and a magnum in the same body is enough to get pregnant because his organs are only there for recreational purposes. When Miyuki continues asking for ways he can get pregnant, Wong asks if it's connected to the Gene Terra project and expresses his disapproval with it. Just then, another Chad named Yulong shows up and tries to join the conversation, but Miyuki gets tired of Dr. Wong's speech and decides to speak with Yulong in private. Moments later, Yulong takes him to a lab to discuss his father's plan to revive his dead son with the Gene Terra project. After Miyuki says he plans to create the boy's clone without any of his memories, Yulong calls him a toxic sicko before they start discussing the weird difference between the current Kowloon and the one that was demolished a long time ago. Yulong then pulls up his data on Yaomei to tell him all about her fame as an actress and the sudden decision to change everything and move to Kowloon. This leads to another conversation about what Kowloon really is and how the Gene Terra project might be affecting reality as they know, but Miyuki ultimately decides to come back after they get more details. Later that day, Kujuo follows Kujurai to a store to shop for the cup noodles, but she eventually gets fed up by his addiction to it and heads to the travel magazine section. After joining her, he asks if she wants to travel, so she takes a moment to muster some courage before saying that she wants to leave so he won't have to keep seeing his dead wife's face all the time. Just as he grabs her shoulder and tells her not to go anywhere, the store gets rocked by an explosion, so he tells her to head back to the office while he runs off to check it out. Sometime in the past, Kudo met up with Gwen to talk about his plan to propose to the original Kyujirai. Gwen thought it was a bit too soon, but promised to be supportive as long as he was sure it was what he wanted. Kudo then reminded him that Kyujirai wanted nothing more than to enjoy living in Kowloon, and the fact that it was about to get demolished was why he wanted to propose so they could spend their last days in the city loving each other. Back in current time, Kudo has just arrived at the explosion site, and after seeing an entire building demolished, he tells everyone else to back away and gets shocked when he sees Gwen. At an alley moments later, they share a hug and ensure that they are both their original versions before Kudo apologizes to Gwen for vanishing when the first Kowloon got demolished. After telling him not to worry about it, Gwen suggests leaving the city as soon as possible because everything in it is fake, but when Kudo refuses, he asks if it's because of the current version of Kyujirai. Upon realizing that he has already met her, Kudo tries to avoid talking about it, but Gwen asks if being around her is something his heart can handle. Kudo then asks why he is also here, so Gwen admits that he also found love and says he wants to learn more about his current lover even though he just got dumped. After Kudo tells him to leave while he still has the chance, Gwen says the exact same thing, but Kudo refuses to hear one more word about it and leaves. Meanwhile, Miyuki, who just made it to Kowloon, gets off the phone with Yulong before suddenly losing consciousness. Sometime in the past, he stopped by a bar in the previous Kowloon city for a drink, and Gwen, who was already a regular, was surprised to see such a hottie in a raggedy old bar. He immediately started pulling every pickup line in his arsenal, and when the server called him lucky for always getting all the hotties, he claimed to just be an innocent civilian who happens to pull only the hottest guys whenever he wants. After Miyuki found his jokes amusing and said he liked the company, Gwen offered to take him somewhere a bit nicer. However, while walking through an alleyway a couple minutes later, Miyuki called him out for lying to the waiter and told him to drop the innocent guy act because it might affect his relationships in the future. The next moment, Gwen confessed that he wanted to drain his glizzy from the moment he laid eyes on him. But because he was too broke to afford a nice hotel, he was just going to offer him a nice drink at a cozy bar. After laughing at him, Miyuki suddenly pulled him in for a kiss and showed off some of his tongue skills so Gwen would see that he wasn't just a sheltered rich kid. A little while after that, they had just taken a break from clapping each other, so Gwen tried to address the elephant in the room, but Miyuki stopped him and said it was cool if he doesn't like a guy equipped with both a glizzy and a kitty. However, Gwen said he didn't care about that and shut him up with a kiss before asking if they can continue seeing each other. Shortly after the sudden heat stroke that knocked Miyuki out in a random alley, he wakes up in a dressing room, and a model explains how she had to drag him all the way inside when they found him. After he thanks her boss for the help, the light suddenly goes out right before Kyujirai walks in to speak with whoever is in charge. Upon realizing that she doesn't recognize him, Miyuki sticks his tongue out, and the trauma from his surprise kiss immediately jogs her memory. He then expresses how excited he is to see her again, and after she also says they have a lot to talk about, he takes her back to his clinic to hear what she has to say. After she floods him with questions about zirconians and what she might actually be, he gets curious and asks where she even heard it from. She then admits that it's just a bunch of rumors she has been hearing about his company's involvement with the Gene Terra program. When he asks if she still wants to get her old memories, she claims to have accepted that they were never hers to begin with and says she is only focused on building a new identity for herself. She goes on to say that people have been reminding her that she isn't the real Kyujirai, and when he asks who they might be, she tells him about Kyuduo's relationship with the original Kyujirai. Miyuki then starts to wonder how Kyuduo has been putting up with seeing the face of his dead wife every day and hopes that his dad will have a terrible experience after he clones his dead son without any memories. After telling her that the only reason she still seeks validation for her existence is because Kyuduo hasn't acknowledged her, Miyuki further explains that she is called a generic because she is definitely not a clone or zirconian. Shortly after that, she meets up with Yaomei to talk about it and suddenly decides to move out of her room. Yaomei gets excited to hear this and suggests selling all the stuff in the room, but she refuses and says Kyuduo should be the one to decide what happens to the apartment. Later that night, she starts choosing all the stuff she plans to take with her, but then she hears a knock and sees Kyuduo at the door. After stopping her from opening it, he tells her that the next day is the anniversary of the original Kyujirai's death. At a restaurant the next morning, Riko gets heated when she decides not to move anymore. But after Kyujirai agrees to change the room a bit, she gets excited again and suggests going to Hong Kong to shop for items. Hours later, they get to the edge of Kowloon, but after Yaomei steps out, Gwen shows up to stop Kyujirai and says she can't step foot outside Kowloon. Just then, a pizza guy shows up to deliver Gwen's order, and when he asks how people can live in an abandoned ruin, Yaomei gets pissed and tells him to stop disrespecting Kowloon. Kyujirai says the exact same thing, but the delivery guy ignores her, so Riko tells him to stop being rude. However, after asking Gwen why she is acting like someone else is there, he laughs it off and leaves. Gwen then explains that Kowloon was actually destroyed 3 years ago and tells Yaomei to look it up. She sees the article but still gets confused, so he further explains that only a handful of outsiders can see the current Kowloon city and the people living inside. He also tells Kyujirai not to leave because she might vanish into thin air, and this causes her to realize that it's probably why Kyuduo told her not to leave the other day. Despite all the facts he just explained, Yaomei refuses to believe that Kyujirai doesn't actually exist because she has spent so much time with her. Kyujirai also struggles to come to terms with everything and asks how he knows so much. So Gwen tells them that he lived in Kowloon before it was demolished 3 years ago. He further explains the experiment he conducted by bringing the original version of Mr. Chan into the city a couple weeks ago. After telling them that the second Mr. Chan vanished the moment he stepped in, they both realize that it would mean the same thing for anyone in Kowloon who still exists in the outside world. Yaomei then reminds them that the original Kyujirai is already gone, which means that this version should be safe, but Gwen tells her to not even consider taking the risk. While Kyujirai suddenly gets lost in thought, Yaomei refuses to believe a word he just said and leaves to go find answers in Hong Kong. After Gwen heads back inside to enjoy his pizza, Kyujirai eventually runs into Kyuduo, who then offers to treat her to lunch. On a certain day years ago, they had just finished her usual game of mahjong with the older citizens and were heading back home with him when she dropped a prescription note. Kyuduo picked it up and wanted to know if she was sick, so she told him about her insomnia, and he immediately promised to make her laugh every single day so she would be too tired to stay awake. Later on, Miyuki goes to visit his dad, but they barely talk for a couple minutes before he starts heading out and receives a call from Yulong, who then reveals that the original Kyujirai died from a drug overdose. After reminding him that she was also Dr. Wang's patient, he explains how Wang prescribed an unusually high dose of her usual drugs on her last visit. Miyuki then says that she would have had to take an insane amount of pills for it to be fatal, which means it was most likely a different medication. When Yulong tells him that all records of her drugs have been erased from the records, he becomes convinced that it's all connected to his dad and the Gene Terra project. While they continue talking, Kyujirai zones out while walking through the city with Kyuduo until they get to the site of the explosion. He tries to tell her about it, but after seeing the lost look on his face, he asks why she has been so distant and cold since they ran into each other. She then reminds him of the time he told her not to go anywhere and asks why he said it, but he gets confused and struggles to find the right words to respond. The next moment, she tells him to promise that he will also stay with her forever and starts crying while talking about how she has no idea what to do next. After pulling her in for a hug to comfort her, he promises to never leave her side and thinks back to a similar promise he made to the original Kyujirai. At that exact moment, Yaomei reaches the crossing point to enter Hong Kong and receives the shock of her life when she finds her bank account empty. She immediately calls Gwen to cry about it, so he apologizes for not telling her that Kowloon money also vanishes as soon as they step out of the city. She then tries to act like an independent baddie who can figure it all out on her own, until he offers to send her some money to use. The baddie act completely fades away when she sees that he sent her an entire year's salary, so she asks why he would send such an amount for her little excursion, and he once again apologizes for not knowing how much brokies are used to.
You're broke! You're f***ing poor!
Several minutes later, her quest to discover the truth about Kowloon begins to fall apart as everyone she meets keeps telling her the same thing the pizza guy did. Just as she considers giving up, an old geezer named Jin, who used to play mahjong with the original Kyujirai, tells her that he used to live in Kowloon before the demolition. She immediately floods him with a ton of questions about what happened before he left, and he basically tells her everything Gwen already explained. However, when she says that there are people still living there, He tells her that his son is part of a group of skeptics who all believe that there is a new phantom Kowloon. She gets intrigued by this and asks for more information, but he tells her to go look it up in one of the internet cafes and says it's not safe to discuss it in public because the Hebanuma company Miyuki's father runs is connected to everything and closely monitors all the former residents of Kowloon. Shortly after that, Yao Mei finds a spot at an internet cafe and spends several minutes scouring the internet for leads until she finds a chat room about Kowloon. She immediately starts texting the only person online, and they quickly build a level of trust over their shared knowledge of the city. However, her new friend admits that he has never actually seen this new phantom Kowloon and spends most of the time asking her for every detail of her experience. Desperate for answers, Yao Mei tells him everything about the city, including her relationship with Kyujirai, without realizing that she is actually chatting with Yulong. At one point, he asks if she has ever noticed anything off about Kowloon, so she takes a couple minutes to think before remembering the night she first arrived and how Kowloon seems to have been trapped in the summer ever since. After telling him about it, she also mentions what Jin said about the Hebanuma company's attempt to cover something up with the demolition. Yulong then also reveals a secret that surprises her, so she promises to investigate as soon as she returns to Kowloon. However, since it's already late, she decides to spend the night in a hotel, and after logging out, she tries to leave and sees Yulong, who had been in the room next door this entire time. The next morning, Kyujirai receives her text asking for a meeting, so she gets up to leave, but Kyuduo holds her back and asks why she is leaving so soon. After saying that it's something important she has to do, she leans in for another freaky workout and decides that Yao Mei can wait a little longer. Comment cultured clones if you want the next part, and don't forget to turn on post notifications after subscribing to be the first to see our next video.